Pokemon FireRed. It's a game that we all know and love, but sometimes it gets boring. It's the same old gym leaders and the same old Pokemon in the same order at the same time. But what if every Pokemon was random? Today we're going to look into that. So as you can see, we start up the game and Professor Oak pulls out a Moltres. The starter options are overall not that interesting. We have Abra, Nidoran, and Poliwag. I choose to go with Poliwag because Abra doesn't really have any moves that you can use early game, and Nidoran just isn't an interesting Pokemon. Anyways, in the first rival battle, my rival chooses Cubone, so the fight goes in my favor because I have the type advantage, but keep in mind that his Pokemon change through every encounter. I head up to Viridian City, get the parcel, and deliver it back to Oak so that I can get my Pokeballs. Now, in this run, I've given myself a set of self-imposed rules, and those are that I must catch the first 6 wild Pokemon that I see. So the first one is Farfetch'd. I'm not too psyched about that one, but I have to catch and use him. The second one is a Nidoqueen, which is a lot better, but still not my favorite. Next up was Weepinbell, which I thought was fine at the time, but now that I think about it, it was just really slow and probably my least favorite Pokemon. After that we found a Primeape, and luckily we found a Charmeleon. This Charmeleon becomes pretty much the most important part of my playthrough. So here's my team. As you can see, we have quite decent type coverage. We have Water, Poison, Ground, Fight, Normal, Flying, Grass, and Fire. I feel very neutral about the team, considering all of the cool Pokemon that we could have gotten. But I'll stop complaining about my team. So we get into the first rival battle, and as you can see, his Pokemon are different. Now this is actually a mistake that I made on my side when I was making the ROM. My rival was supposed to keep the same set of randomized Pokemon, but instead each time counted as a new encounter, so he had random Pokemon each time. Anyways, we hit his Slowpoke with a couple of pecks from Farfetch'd, and then we switch out to our Weepinbell and take him out. After that, we make light work of his Execute. We start off with Charmeleon, but we ultimately end up switching him out for Nidoqueen, where I try a couple of double kicks, but then I realize that they're not effective, and I just switch over to a couple of Poison Stings, and that is enough to take him out. So yeah, overall one of the easiest rival battles that I've had in a very, very long time. As soon as I get into Pewter City, I immediately attempt to take on Brock, but I'm met with a stark reality. His Executor wiped my entire team, and unfortunately, I whited out. But I did not give up there. I went in for a second attempt. I start with Poliwag, and I hit his Ninetales with a couple of bubbles. They're super effective, but they're not actually doing much to him. So I switch to Nidoqueen, and I try a couple of double kicks, which end up taking him down. And as a bonus, it levels up my Poliwag and Nidoqueen to level 11. Learning my lesson from the previous attempt, I immediately switch out my Nidoqueen for my Charmeleon, and I hit his Executor with a couple of Embers. We luckily get a burn on him, but he hits us with Hypnosis, which makes me switch out my Charmeleon for my Primeape, but he gets taken out, so I switch back for my Charmeleon, and the Executor concedes to his burns. This earns me my Boulder Badge on, unfortunately, my second attempt. After defeating Brock, I run into Mount Moon, where I encounter a few notable Pokemon, those being Kabuto, Porygon, and Omanyte. I defeat the Super Nerd and choose the Helix Fossil just for funsies. Upon arrival in Cerulean City, I immediately go for my rival battle, which is an interesting one, because he starts off with a Zapdos. I switch to my Weepinbell, which unfortunately gets paralyzed and taken out. So I switch to my next best option in Charmeleon. I get a couple of good embers off before getting paralyzed, and switching out to Nidoqueen to finish him off. Next, he sent out his Golduck, which I descended to combat with my Farfetch'd, and I easily take him out. From here, it is smooth sailing, with him just having a Zubat and a Paras. So I take out his last two Pokemon with ease, in the process leveling Farfetch'd to level 17. Now that I have the confidence from defeating my rival, I head to Misty for the second gym battle. She starts off with a Magikarp, which makes me feel very at home, and I just keep my Poliwag out and take him down for the XP. However, she does use a potion, which is just really annoying because there's really no point. It's just to prolong the death of her beloved Magikarp. But yeah, we took down the Magikarp, and next up is a Beedrill. We decide to bring out our Charmeleon to deal with him, and we take him down in just a couple of embers because it is super effective. Charmeleon levels up to level 19, and we defeat gym leader Misty. I decide to use the Surf TM that we get from Misty on Poliwag, and then I head down to SS Anne, where I find my rival yet again. This time his team consists of a Wartortle, a Poliwrath, a Flareon, and a Ghastly. Unfortunately, Weepinbell is a terrible Pokemon, and he only lasts about like 1 or 2 hits before I have to switch him out for my Farfetch'd, which I use a Fury attack on, and he takes down Wartortle and grows to level 22. I decided to keep Farfetch'd in, and I land a Fury attack, but he puts me to sleep. So I switch him out for a Nidoqueen, where I use some double kicks, but then my Nidoqueen gets put to sleep. So I just decide to go back to my Farfetch'd, who is still asleep, and I try to use some Pecks. Fortunately, I finally landed one, which brings Poliwrath down to really low health, and he takes himself out with Recoil. Next up is Flareon, and I hit a critical hit with Charmeleon. I then switch him out for Poliwag, and I hit Flareon with a couple of Water Pulses, which takes him out in the end. Next up is his Ghastly, which is one of the less difficult Pokemon in this fight. I open with Poliwag, which I use to put Ghastly to sleep with Hypnosis. I then switch to Charmeleon, where I just finish off Ghastly with a couple of Embers. Now that I've defeated my rival, I can get up to the captain, where I give him a bit of a back rub, and he gives me the HM for Cut. I immediately teach Cut to Victreebel because there's not much use for him anyways. After finding both switches, I now have access to Lieutenant Surge in the third gym. He opens up with a Moltres, which is very interesting. I try to put him to sleep with Hypnosis, but it fails. So I decide to use Water Pulse and do a decent amount of damage before he takes me down with a Wing Attack. So then I decide to fight fire with fire and bring out my Charmeleon. I do a little bit of damage, but he ultimately takes that out too. I switch to my Nidoqueen, which gets taken out very quickly, but it does help my Primeape out and lands a poison. After that, he brings out his Mankey, and I bring out Farfetch'd, and I take out the Mankey and Tentacool in just a couple of shots, taking down Lieutenant Surge and earning the Thunder Badge. Now I'm able to head to this house and get a bike voucher. Of course, I run straight to the bike shop and get my bicycle. I then ride my bike down to Rock Tunnel, where I get lost, get whited out, and evolve Poliwag into Poliwhirl. And I must admit, no matter how many times I play this game, I still get lost in Rock Tunnel every single goddamn time. But I eventually find my way out, and I head into Pokemon Tower, where I find my rival for yet another battle. This time, his team is Alakazam, Aerodactyl, Charmander, Chansey, and Metapod. His Alakazam puts up a bit of a fight, but he ultimately goes down without too much of a hassle. The main problem in this battle, though, was with his Aerodactyl. After many attempts, I managed to take out his Aerodactyl by starting off with my Charmeleon, using an Ember, and luckily getting a burn. I then switched to my Nidoqueen, where I use a Body Slam, and then pretty much just absolutely spam double kick until I take him down. His next 3 Pokemon were really easy, the first of those being Charmander, which I one-shot with my Poliwhirl. After that, he switches to Chansey, and I switch to Primeape, which I also one-shot. And after that, I use some moves on his Metapod with my Primeape, and eventually I just end up swapping him out for my Weepinbell so that I can get some experience on him, because I have been sorely neglecting him. But yeah, after a long while of Metapod just using Harden and me using moves that are not effective, I eventually get to take him out, and we get the victory on my rival. I then get to the Ghost and realize that I can't do anything because I don't have the Stealth Scope, so I head to Celadon City. I decide that first I'm gonna go to the gym, but I meet a Mewtwo there, and he just absolutely wipes my entire team, and I decide I have to try again with fully healed Pokemon. So once I get them all fully healed up, I go back for another try. I start off with Weepinbell, but he gets one-shotted as I could expect. After losing a couple of Pokemon, I eventually take down his Slowpoke, and from there it's actually not too bad. I use Hypnosis on Mewtwo and take him out. After that, the rest of the Pokemon were really easy. With that victory in mind, I decide to take on Erica, and she starts with a Venusaur, which is really not out of the ordinary for her. I use my Charmeleon and she puts me asleep, but eventually I use a couple of Embers and take him out. Next, she sends out her Poliwhirl, which is a bit more weird for her. I use my Weepinbell and I get put to sleep straight away. He uses water guns and they're not effective against me, but when I wake up, I finally use Sleep Powder on him. I use a Vine Whip, which does a lot of damage, but he puts me straight back to sleep. Eventually though, I do wake up and land my Vine Whip, which takes him out. Last but not least is her Nidorino, which I attempt to take down with my Farfetch, but that doesn't go to plan, because I get poisoned. So I switch out to my Nidoqueen, and I use a Body Slam, which gets so much health off. But he uses a Hyper Potion, so that doesn't really do much. I use a Body Slam and get him down to a slither of health, and eventually take it down, defeating Erica and getting the Rainbow Badge. After that, I defeat this Mew, and get this Team Rocket Grunt to drop his Lift Key. Now for my first fight with Giovanni. He starts off with a Machamp, which I easily take care of with my Poliwag. Next up is his Tentacruel, which admittedly I do struggle with quite a bit, because he ends up taking out my Poliwhirl, and takes out my Primeape actually very quickly too, leaving me with just my Charmeleon, and luckily I take him out. That secures me the win against Giovanni and gets me the Stealth Scope, so that I can finally go back to Pokemon Tower and identify this Marowak and send him back to where he needs to go. As a thanks, this man takes me back to his house and he gives me the flute, which I use to wake up this Snorlax, which actually turns out to be a Rhydon somehow. Anyways, I one-shot him and get on my way. Now that I'm in Fuchsia City, I go and I decide to try out for the gym. But as the idiot that I am, I forget to heal my Pokemon, which causes me to white out, but on the upside, I did evolve my Charmeleon into a Charizard. So I head back and I decide to give it a second shot. And it's actually quite funny because his team wasn't really that different from what it would have been. I immediately put the Muck to sleep with Hypnosis and then switch out to Nidoqueen. His Muck does become quite a bit of a problem when he's just using Minimize and I can't really land anything, but eventually I do land a Body Slam and it paralyzes him, which gets him to low enough health where I can finish him off with my Charizard. After that, Tentacool is brought out and I use Sleep Powder with Weepinbell. But he does switch Tentacool out for Haunter. I take Haunter out in just 2 Water Pulses and back out comes Tentacool. Although he's not sleeping anymore, so I hit him with another Hypnosis and I quickly finish him off. Last up is Porygon, which I switch to Primeape for. I use a couple of Seismic Tosses, it doesn't really work, so I switch to my Charizard and there you have it. My 5th gym badge acquired with really not too much hassle. I head to this girl and I get the TM for Fly, which I immediately give to Farfetch'd, and then I head down to the Safari Zone where I acquire the Surf HM and find some gold teeth, which I give right back to the Warden and he gives me the HM for Strength. I decide to teach Surf to Poliwhirl and then I decide to teach Strength to Nidoqueen. I then fly down to Celadon City, so that I can get this tea from the old lady and cross the guard. Now that I have access to Silphco, I have a look around and I find the card key. We come across our rival and his team is as follows: Venusaur, Poliwhirl, Pidgey, Slowpoke, and Arbok. Anyways, I hit the Venusaur with a flamethrower. He hits me with Poison Powder, but I ultimately take him down with another flamethrower. He chooses to switch to Poliwhirl, and I choose to switch to Victory Bell, where I use my Sleep Powder to put him to sleep and Vine Whip to do significant damage to him. He decided to switch back to Pidgey, and I decided to switch to Charizard and use Flamethrower, which took his Pidgey down in 1. After that, I switch back to Victory Bell, and he switches back to Poliwhirl. He one-shots my Victory Bell, unfortunately, and I use Fly on my Farfetch'd, and I take him down. I use Fly on Slowpoke, he uses Amnesia, I use a Sand Attack, I use Sword Dance, and I use another Fly, which gets him down to what must have been 1 HP, I use another Fly, and I take him down. After that, he chooses to bring out his last Pokemon, which is the Arbok, and I choose to bring out my Nidoqueen. He manages to paralyze me, but we manage to just work through it and take him down in the end. The next Giovanni fight is really nothing to write home about. Nothing really special happens, so I've sped it up quite a bit. But I pretty much just take out his whole team with my Charizard and switch to a couple Pokemon here and there. So I defeated Giovanni without any problems, and that opens up the Psychic Gym to me, which doesn't actually end up being very psychic. With the first Pokemon being Clefable, which I easily take care of with my Primeape, just using fighting type moves, which are super effective. Although the minimizing does get a bit annoying. Next up is the Rhyhorn, and I just decide to use fighting type moves once again, but he knocks out my Primeape. So I switch to my Poliwhirl and I use a Surf, which one-shots him. Next is a bit unusual, it's a level 38 Squirtle. I bring out my Victory Bell, I use a Poison Powder, and some Vine Whips, and I easily take care of the Squirtle too. Last but not least, she decided to bring out a Ditto. which obviously copied my Nidoqueen's form, and we just traded body slams, and I ended up winning that one. Though potions do make it a little bit tedious. Anyways, Nidoqueen reaches level 35, and I add another badge to my collection. After that, we surf down to Cinnabar Island, and I head into Pokemon Mansion, where I very quickly find the secret key, and I take on Blaine. He starts off with a Dratini, which I use Hypnosis on to put to sleep. I then take him out in 2 hits with my Poliwhirl. After that, he brings out an Ivysaur, so I switch to my Charizard, and I just use a Flamethrower. This takes him out in 1 shot. Next up is Aerodactyl, which is a Pokemon that has proven to be very strong in this playthrough and that I've struggled with many times before. Straight out of the gate, he one-shots my Charizard and does half damage to my Nidoqueen. Nidoqueen does paralyze him and gets him down to quite low health, but unfortunately he does use heals. So I just decide to swap out to my Poliwhirl, and I use 2 Surfs, which actually prove to do quite a lot of damage and take him down in 2 shots. The last Pokemon that he brought out was Dodrio, which was admittedly quite a tough battle, but all my Pokemon banded together and secured me the victory, taking out his Dodrio with admitted difficulty, but securing us the badge. Our last gym battle, Giovanni. He starts off with a Butterfree. I switch to my Charizard and I hit him with a Flamethrower, which takes him down in 1 pretty easily. He uses a Zubat and I take him down in 1 with the Flamethrower. Dewgong survives the Flamethrower hit and I switch to Nidoqueen. With Nidoqueen I use Superpower and it is super effective and takes Dewgong out in 1 shot. After that he sends out Nidorino and I choose to send out Farfetch'd. I use Agility first, and then I use Fly, which so nearly one-shots him, and unfortunately I get poisoned. From here he uses a Hyper Potion, which really pisses me off, but I use another Fly, and it gets him back down to low health. At this point I'm really low health from the poison, so I switch out to Nidoqueen, and he heals up again. I hit him with more than half health gone, and I finish him off in just another hit. Lastly, he switches to Metapod, and I use Charizard to use a Flamethrower, and there you go, Giovanni is the last gym member, and we have defeated him, gaining us the Earth Badge. It's now time to head to Victory Road, but first we have to take on our last rival battle. He brings out the Mankey, and he hits me with such a powerful move, and fortunately, I hit him with Fly and take him out 1 shot. At this point, I send out Weepinbell, and he sends out Shelder. Shelder just uses Protects, and eventually I land a Razor Leaf and take him down in 1. Next up is his Electrode, which uses Self-Destruct and does all of the work for me. He sends out a Sandshrew, which I one-shot with Surf from Poliwhirl. And after that, Dugtrio and Cubone go down in a very similar fashion, securing us the win. Now we get to go onto Victory Road. At this point, I am so excited for this to all be coming to an end. I'm so excited to finally part ways with my new least favorite Pokemon, Weepinbell. And so I head into Victory Road, push some rocks around, and I finally get to the Indigo Plateau and the Elite Four. Laurelie's first Pokemon is a Nidoking. I decide to use a Surf and it doesn't quite kill him. He uses a potion, but I land 2 Surfs and take him down. I definitely want to switch Pokemon here to Nidoqueen. I use Superpower and it does substantial damage. Follow that up by 2 body slams and I take out his Electrobuzz. For the Golbat, I switch to Charizard, which I land 2 flamethrowers with to ultimately take him out. After that, I sub in Primeape to use Cross Chop on Kangaskhan, and it gets him in 1 shot. I do similar thing to Persian, and it gets him down in 3, beating the first of the Elite Four. Now for the second of the Elite Four. We don't talk about Bruno, but I guess you insist. I one-shot his Cubone with his Surf on Poliwhirl. I then very stupidly don't change Pokemon and I get one-shotted by his Magnemite. But eventually I switch to Nidoqueen and I take him down pretty quickly. He brings out his Ninetales and I fight fire with fire. I try using a flamethrower for some reason, but eventually I just stick to slashes and I get him down in about 3 or 4. After that he brings out a Weedle, which I use flamethrower on and I one-shot. Brings out Kangaskhan, and I do substantial damage with Primeape before he inevitably gets killed. I bring out Nidoqueen, and she finishes the job. And that right there is why we don't talk about Bruno, second of the Elite Four down. Now for Agatha. She starts off with a Squirtle. I decide to switch to my Weepinbell, who takes half damage, but actually does one-shot the Squirtle. Next up is a Fearow. I decide to switch to Nidoqueen, and Nidoqueen gets a poison off before getting killed in 2 shots. I switch to Charizard, and I kill the Fearow, and the Gloom, and the Oddish, and the Meowth, all in 1 flamethrower. That's the third of the Elite Four down. Next up is Lance, the leader of the Elite Four. Luckily, he starts with a Nidoran. I put him to sleep with Hypnotize, and I take him out in 2 Surfs. I then switch to Charizard and take out his Venusaur in 1 flamethrower. After that, he sends out a Psyduck, and I choose to send out Weepinbell. I use a Razor Leaf, and it gets him down to really low health. He heals, but I get him down in 1 shot. Next, I bring out Nidoqueen to deal with Doduo, which she does. She uses Body Slams to get him down to probably about 1 health and paralyzes him and eventually gets him down. Next up is Dodrio, which was a bit more tricky admittedly. He took down my Nidoqueen, but Nidoqueen built a nice foundation and I switched to Poliwhirl and finished him off. That's defeating Lance. Now on to the champion. He starts with Charmander, which is very lucky because I can one-shot him with my Poliwhirl. Next up is his Jolteon. I switch to Nidoqueen, and I sort of just chisel away at his health because he can't really do any substantial damage to me. So after a little while I use Superpower and I take him out. I do a little bit of damage to Marowak before switching to Poliwhirl and ultimately finishing him off with a Surf. After that, I switched to my Nidoqueen and he brought out Magneton, which really did not do much to me. I used Superpower, which got him down to really low health and got him down in 2. After that, my rival had another Marowak to bring out. I used Surf and it did substantial damage, but ultimately I needed another one to take him down. Now onto the most challenging Pokemon that I've faced this entire run. I got very lucky on this run, having the flamethrowers do a lot of damage and taking down Articuno in 2. And there you go! I am the victor. I won Pokemon FireRed version with completely randomized Pokemon. And although it wasn't the best team, they will all live forever in my heart. Except for Weepinbell. I hate you.